I wanted to go because John Muir's been my childhood hero, a 19th century Scotsman who changed our view of nature. Sam said he'd come if he didn't have to navigate. This is my story about John Muir, explorer, naturalist, mystic. He saved California's redwoods and Yosemite Valley. His vision inspired the first national parks in the world. We often know what great men and women accomplished, but not how they started off. I wanted to tell this young Scotsman's story, his conversion from farm boy to wilderness sage, by retracing his first great journey, a 1,000-mile walk through the American South in 1867, 2 years after the Civil War ended.
Just give me some pictures anyway.
Forget walking in the USA today. You need wheels, at least 2.
It's a great machine.
A wonderful, wacky 77-year-old neighbor offered me his motorcycle.
Get on it, right? Right? And just get on it, right? Nail it. Second gear, 85.
With my friend's remarks in mind, I sensed Sam and I would have an unusual trip. The journey began in Louisville, Kentucky, and would carry me 1,000 miles south to Cedar Key, Florida.
There's the railroad bridge. Maybe we ought to go and see if that's the one that Muir walked across. Looks like it might be.
John Muir's quest was to reach South America and botanize in the Lord's Gardens of the tropic South, see the palms and alligators he read about as a boy. In his journal, Muir said he steered through the big city by compass and spoke to no one. He carried little, a plant press and a loaf of bread. I carry a camera and will use his journal as my compass.
Hi, Sammy.
Compare his world to mine. What would John Muir recognize today? And how much of John Muir's world could I find on the journey? He walked through Kentucky under green and towering oaks, headed south. Sam and I rode through a wilderness of a different kind.
Oh boy. This is just heaven out here. Finally gotten out of that city, the big city of Louisville. These small roads in the knobs of Kentucky. Windy roads. I've really been a person who's traveled mostly on rivers and in canoes. That's been the way in which I've seen the world, not been involved with machines much at all. But now that I'm on the bike and I've been riding it around, it's really an awful lot like it was in a canoe. You could think of the motorcycle as just a faster canoe, really. So in 1867, when John Muir walked through this part of the world, the idea of a car hadn't even come onto the drawing board. So he went by foot. It took him 52 days and he walked 1,000 miles. He traveled 25, 30 miles a day. In a couple of minutes, I could do 25 miles, 30 miles.
After my second long day, how could I pass by the chance to sleep in a wigwam? especially a concrete one with air conditioning.
I think they work. But when did they ever start lock and wiggle? Whoa! Sammy, here we are. Well, we got out of Louisville, and that was a good thing, huh? Boy, what a city. Well, Sam, here's Mr. Muir's journal. My plan was simply to push on in a general southward direction by the wildest, leafiest, and least trodden way I could find, promising the greatest extent of virgin forest. Folding my map, I shouldered my little bag and plant press and strode away among the old Kentucky oaks. How about that, Sam? What a nice thought that is. And how different.
I drifted to sleep thinking of Muir, loner and botanist, wandering the countryside. At 29, not a typical man of his day. As frontier America was busy whacking the life out of wilderness, Muir's intense love of trees and plants was carrying him on an opposite journey to preserve wilderness. I arrived in Munfordville, where Muir met Mr. Munford, founder of the village. I went to the Historical Society to ask if either man's memory was still alive.
It is open.
Mr. Mumford had taken Muir in and refreshed him with pears.
Hello.
Hi.
I came in to find out about Mumford Town.
About Mumford Town.
I did. I wanted to know if there are any Mumfords left.
Not in Mumfordville.
Uh-huh.
Are you related?
No, I'm not, but I have a story, too. So I'm interested to see if anybody remembers Mr. Mumford.
Well, that would be too long ago.
Not any of us.
Let's see. Well, you've probably been through it a little bit yourself. Is there something that caught your eye or back at the time when he was...
Well, let's see. That's a brother, Thomas Bolin Mumford.
Do we have a picture of Mr. Mumford himself?
I'm not sure.
The Mumfords are gone. How quickly things fade and become memory. I felt finding physical clues and connecting might be difficult. But on leaving Mr. Mumford's house, I saw the pear tree, my first real connection with John Muir, one that refreshed us both. Several days out of Louisville, Muir went to see Mammoth Cave. Today, it's a national park, part of his legacy. How would Muir like this World Heritage Site and International Biosphere Reserve?
Can I have a general ticket to walk through?
We just have the guided trips right now. We don't have anything where you can go on your own.
Now, you won't be able to walk your pace. We'll have to go through as a group. Can you imagine all the confusion if everyone here walked their own pace? So up front, I will walk slowly. In the back, Jim will be walking a little bit faster. I will turn the lights on. Jim will turn the lights off.
Did you have a problem getting back to that?
No promises.
We'll just have to walk faster than they do.
We should be back at 3, no problem.
Okay.
This trip now involves history. We want you to be happy. We don't want any of you to be disappointed.
Sam and I decided to go on our own anyway, but without a ticket we couldn't go in the cave. But we read in the journal what Muir heard about the cave from a local settler, that it was not worth going to see. It was nothing but a hole in the ground. Muir describes the man as one of those useful, practical men, too wise to waste precious time with weeds, caves, fossils, or anything else he could not eat. Later that week, I met two new-style eco-farmers outstanding in their field.
If they come. They were begging when we were coming out to the road.
So how much of the time do you get to use the horses?
They can be used as long as the ground isn't too rocky or isn't too steep. So probably 50% of the time on slopes around here. I've always had a real connection with animals, but I always thought talking to plants was very odd until I ended up by myself in a redwood grove. And those old trees impinged on me, their feelings and their personality, and I could no longer say that plants did not communicate as well as animals did. So the redwoods it's very important that they were saved. Because even old hardheads like me, they can get through to.
That's neat.
I just got in from a all-night to Chicago and back trip, so I'm kind of groggy. I've been up.
Yeah, and that was working for Greyhound?
Yeah.
As a driver?
Yeah.
So you have to do a couple of things to make ends meet.
You see, unfortunately, anymore the states are full of jobs that it takes 2 or 3 to make the rent.
I know.
I mean, it's so very common anymore. Almost everybody is working 2 jobs. And it just keeps getting harder and harder. Here's one of the stumps. Old growth, these trees should be 4 to 6 feet diameter.
Well, this is one of the things that got me about John Muir's walk when I realized you couldn't retrace it on foot. The real reason, not only the development, but the climax forest, the virgin forest he had at that time
Was much more open.
You could see a half a mile at a...
Much more open than what we're dealing with here. Now this, for instance, is a very good cedar log. Okay, that's a good big cedar tree, really. And good tall one, high quality. And that's where they're using a single mule or a single horse a lot of times to pull them out. Being as how this would be so close to the road, I would not. I would just simply use muscle.
And then this car here was my dad's last car, and when he didn't want it, he gave it to me, and I used it till it fell apart, basically, and then the engine is out of that one and in the blue one at the road. Engine's still functional. And theoretically, they're here next to the forge. There is a forge on the other side of this oak tree for the use of that steel. They aren't junk. They're a steel storage pile.
You're not keeping a very straight face.
It's true, though. I can show you the forge.
I'll take your word for it.
Whenever they get used, I don't know.
I rode further south into Tennessee, past small towns and homesteads, following John Muir's route to the mountains.
That's one way to get your car into the gas station. Why? Yeah. Well, they can do that. What's her name?
Often Muir received hospitality, and Sam and I had no trouble meeting strangers either.
He's a terrier.
I thought he was. I wasn't for sure.
Really? Some people think he's a sheep.
I told Patty I come in from work yesterday and I passed you. And I told Patty, I said, I just seen a dog riding a motorcycle. And she said, well, you're crazier than a loon.
Same thing I had.
Yeah, he's making quite a name for himself in this part of the world. So have you ever heard of a guy named John Muir? That's the...
John Muir?
Muir, yeah. He took a walk through here in 1867.
I told you last night.
See y'all later. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Well, we'll let y'all get back on the road. I wanted my youngin' to meet y'all. We'll see y'all later. Y'all not staying in Alpine tonight?
Nope, we're on our way.
You're on your way.
Yeah.
Well, y'all have a safe trip and see y'all later. Come on.
We've spent a few days now traveling in this flatland, and I would love, as we're beginning to get to see, like we did this morning when I woke up, there was a mist in the valley covering Burkesville, and I can't wait to get into the mountains ahead of me. The Allegheny Mountains were the first real mountains Muir had climbed. He reveled in their peaceful beauty, such an ocean of wooded, wavy, swelling mountain beauty and grandeur. The mountains were full of tough, practical English and Scottish settlers. Muir was challenged by a blacksmith who said, "Surely you are able to do something better than wander over the country and look at weeds and blossoms." Muir countered by saying, "Christ told his disciples to consider the lilies, how they grow. Now whose advice am I to take, yours or his?"
Whoa! Oh boy, Sammy, the Deal Gap.
316 turns over 11 steep miles, and I wasn't alone.
Howdy. It's going well.
Do you know who John Muir was?
Who?
John Muir?
No.
Pardon? How fast?
We were barely moving when we hit that stuff.
Uh-huh. You went down?
He did.
Is it a left-hand turn, obviously?
It comes up like that.
We had two this year, and that's the first death we've had in 8 years. So we get a lot of broken bones and a lot of broken motorcycles.
So you a rider?
Not passenger.
How does it feel when you're in the back?
It's not good. My life is in somebody else's hands. I'm out of control.
So what do you do, tap them on the helmet or what?
Then 360.
Yeah, or squeeze extremely hard or something. Pray.
This road is called the Dragon.
They actually try to slay the dragon, don't they?
You seen a T-shirt in here that Pete had?
Something about I slayed the dragon.
Right on the back that says sometimes the dragon wins. That dragon wins a lot.
Do you think there's a person in the community that wouldn't mind talking to someone about John Muir or about the life that they live in the mountains there?
Think about that for a while.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to put you on the wrong one.
No, or have me, and I wouldn't want to intrude on anybody.
Well, not just that. These people around here are very private, and they're inclined to shoot people. I'm serious.
Really?
Go.
To be by water and quiet let me feel closer to John Muir's presence.
Oh, God. Sammy, stay! Sammy, stay! Sammy, stay! Sammy, don't you get near there. Sammy, no! That's a rattlesnake. Sammy, back up. Sammy, you back up. Whoa. That must have been about 8 feet long. Wow. Sammy, I'm very glad you didn't come and try to see what that was. But I think when I probably first heard about John Muir was when I was in elementary school, probably about 9 or 10. And we'd read a short life of him. And one of the things I really enjoyed was his climbing in a 200-foot sequoia during a hurricane. So he could tie himself in and feel the power of that wind blowing the tree through that forest. So when I got home, I waited for the next stormy day, and I climbed the tallest pine tree around our house, which might have been about 12 feet high. And I stayed in it until I got soaking wet, and my mother said, "Okay, Rob, why don't you come in now?" But since then, I've grown to appreciate Muir and just the unusual individual that he was. Born in Scotland, lived there for the first 11 years of his life, and he was brought up in a very strict Protestant sect. His dad was almost, you'd say, a fanatic, and he'd beat his 2 children if they didn't learn their Bible. And he, John Muir, had a difficult time with his dad. His father would just make decisions and move the whole family. He did it once to America, and they came to Wisconsin. And Muir was pretty much cheap slave labor for the father. But he had a way out. He studied. He had a mechanical genius. He could invent things. He set out to make himself a living, which he did in working in a carriage wheel factory, a factory that made carriage wheels. What changed him from devoting himself to becoming a wealthy industrialist was an accident. Happened one night when he was tightening one of those leather belts with a file, and it flew in his right eye and pierced the cornea. And his left eye, by the time he got back to his rooming house, was blind and a sympathetic reaction. And although his sight came back, for 8 weeks he didn't know that he'd see again. And he made a promise to God during the time that he was in that darkness. He said, "If my sight comes back, I'll no longer work for the inventions of man. I want to work for the creations of God."
The further John Muir journeyed into the mountains, the wilder the landscape appeared. He met unshorn, uncombed, fiercely independent but hospitable men. Today is the first day of hunting season. I met modern mountain men off to hunt hog and bear.
Hello. Good morning. Hi, Greg.
You out and about and ready to go?
Yeah, we're getting ready.
All right.
You should have one of those for me, so I don't get lost.
Well, I've got an extra one you want me to tie it on to. You'll get lost, but we can track you down and find you.
That would be right. The radio collar.
Yeah.
The orange kit is so that when the bear sees me, he won't shoot me.
Ain't been nobody here but us. I mean, we like it.
One glimpse of this orange army and every self-respecting bear and hog vanished, along with the dogs.
Yeah, that big red dog down here on the bank right under the power line.
All right, you 10-4, I appreciate it. There ain't a brown one down there with him, is there?
No, with us to one dog. He's keep trying to get in the boat with us, and we just kind of ease off and leave him, but he's still here with us.
Hey, 10-4, we'll be off down that way in a little while to pick him up, and I appreciate it.
10-4.
We didn't see a thing, but it was only the first day of the season. And on the way down to the boat, I was surprised by a turn in the conversation.
Doesn't make you feel the individual has a chance to...
Not against the government system.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on that.
Oh, do. Please, I'd love to hear it. I mean, that's what this guy, John Muir, was all about. He was about the individual. He was not at all for the authority or any kind of structures. He didn't even like religion that were organized. And
basically about the same way I am. We just come from my church up there on top of that mountain.
And when did you start going to it?
I don't know. We've been coming up here for years now. Well, the church down there next to his house, one day last year, they had a big fist fight there on Sunday morning. Had to call the law on Sunday morning to break the fist fight up. And well, we had a preacher up there 2 years ago. He walked up to this elderly lady in a wheelchair and just laid his hand on her shoulder. And her husband, 80-something years old, little senile, he just decked the preacher right there, swore up and down the preacher making a pass at his wife. So he decked him right in the middle of the church. And then they wonder why I don't come to church.
Yeah. Ernie, this the dam you were talking about? The one they built? No.
The one we was talking about, it's over in Loudoun County. Okay. But the headwaters of it, not this way below us, but the next way.
Oh boy, what a... So now this is when you leave the photographer and go home, right?
Hey, you've been a pretty good fellow.
Ooh, it's an eerie morning with all that fog and mist. What do you think, Sam? It's the kind of morning you could expect anything to come out of the gloom. Ooh. Amazing. Fields of the wood. Wow. 2 days later, I came to a place that reminded me of the fundamental beliefs John Muir was leaving behind on his walk. Unbelievable. Okay. We were coming down from the mountains into the town of Murphy and came across this place. What is this place?
Well, very few people get to make a pilgrimage to Israel in this country. You know, I doubt 1%. So this is for people, this is the closest thing they could see of about what it was like, about what it is like in Israel and what it would have been like when Jesus was crucified. So we built this to replicate the original site so people could gain a little bit of an appreciation for the garden tomb where he was resurrected.
You know the shortest poem in the English language? It's called Fleas. It goes, Adam had 'em.
Right, I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that struck me so much is here was a little cabin. This must have been a beautiful hollow full of the great oaks and the great chestnuts, perhaps, that were covered this land.
Yes, which was much larger in those days than they are now.
Huge.
They were virgin.
Right.
Yeah.
Virgin and climax. So today, the hollow has been transformed into a memorial for a spiritual fact, but what got lost were all the trees. And I'm trying to understand, as I go through my life, how come we replace the natural world with our vision of the world, such as we have the commandments and
One of the things we've tried to do here is to preserve the natural. We are trying to be careful to what we have here is to preserve it.
Okay.
However, what's more important, and then the trees are very important. But what's more important than trees are the souls of men.
Well, this is where Muir would have disagreed in a sense, because as he went on his 1,000-mile walk, he had a conversion from the strict Protestant faith he'd been brought up in towards one that said that trees and all the creatures of God's world, flowers and bugs, have an equal value.
A tree is not created in the image of God. It doesn't have a soul. The one unique thing that God made on this earth to reflect his image most perfectly was a man. So the most important thing in the world is a man and the things that men do.
I recalled a passage from Muir's journal that said, "The world, we are told, was made for man, a presumption not supported by all the facts. After human beings have played their part in creation's plan, they too may disappear without any extraordinary commotion." Wowee. Wowee, Sammy, look at this. Yeah, Sammy, it's all right, he's not alive.
We're getting it Friday? Okay, I'm coming.
Now, do you know who John Muir was? Did you ever hear his name?
John
Muir?
Muir. I've heard the name. I used to work for Sue Hubbard. You ever heard of her?
No, you don't have to press the thing. It's doing it while we...
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
You hold it, that's right.
All right.
Got it like that.
Okay.
And then I take a bite.
Okay. Ah, you got it upside down.
What, the hamburger?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean upside down?
Well,
Oh, you mean it should be this way?
There, now. Now it makes you look like you know how to eat a hamburger.
I was in the Old South 5 days later. In Muir's time, a landscape and people ravaged by civil war. I went to seek the advice of an expert, the famous professor of ecology, Eugene Odom, hoping to hear what relevance John Muir holds for us today.
So now, how do we deal with the rich and the poor? And that's the thing.
Not very well.
See, what you could end up already beginning to show is rich people, you and I, living in enclaves, gated communities, with gates on them and some machine guns. If you're an affluent person in South America, first thing you have to do is fence your yard and hire 2 guards, because people are so poor and desperate they'll come and take anything or kill you if necessary. And so we will have the enclaves of the rich, and we'll have huge masses of poor roaming the world. You see, the growth of the United States now is not, we pretty well control our own growth, but we're going to have doubling of the population due to immigration. So what do you do about that immigration problem? What did John Muir, what would he say?
He didn't.
He didn't. So you see, he does not.
He wouldn't want people.
What he doesn't give us any messages, as far as I know, that we can use today. I'm sorry.
The world has changed, but I did not agree with the professor. In a man-made world of straight lines, Muir's gift is to inspire us, to ask us to see ourselves as part of nature, not its lord and master. All the same, I was feeling overwhelmed. In this part of Georgia, Muir met a planter who said, "Young man, your hobby is botany. Mine is electricity. I believe that the time is coming, though we may not live to see it, when that mysterious force, electricity, used now only for the telegraph, will do all the work of the world." How would Muir have liked this wilderness? Highways, concrete, trucks, and nuclear plants. The trip has really had a lot to do with staying in cheap motels and eating in fast food places and riding down the highway in a very fast motorcycle. What a very unusual thing if John Muir had been able to see. John Muir's inspiration was not present here. Maybe I was looking in the wrong place. I had to get away from the big cities and highways. I went down back roads in search of the Savannah River. Muir had walked its banks and met freed slaves and Confederate families, still gracious to a Northerner in spite of losing the Civil War. As he was first walking down the Savannah River, he came to the house of a Dr. Perkins.
Yes, we got Perkinses here.
Are we?
Yeah.
Well, it would go all the way back to, doesn't tell where he was. He just says he had a long walk after sundown, at last was received at the house of Dr. Perkins. Heard long recitals of war happenings, discussions of slave question and northern politics. Thoroughly characteristic Southern family, refined in manners and kind, but immovably prejudiced on everything connected with slavery.
Yeah, yes.
Muir wrote in his journal, "I am made to feel I am now in a strange land."
Oh, wow.
Night is coming on, and I am filled with indescribable loneliness. Felt feverish, bathed in a black, silent stream. Obtained lodging in a planter's home. Are you both retired now?
Yeah, I'm retired, yeah.
And are you as busy as you ever were?
Oh, Lord, yeah. And you know what that is? Gardening and fishing.
Which one comes first?
Well, my cats come first. And then my garden, and then fishing. See, now, when I get tired of doing one thing, I got 3 jobs to take care of. I get up in the morning, I take care of my cat. And then I get in my garden. When I get tired of working in the garden, then I go fishing. And then when I get tired of down there, I'm tired I retired from the day. So my day's work is done.
Everybody had 8.
Oh, look.
And they left that one piece.
Is that a piece of pumpkin pie?
No.
Oh. Probably something well, let me see if I know what it is. Oop.
Can you name it?
That's sweet potato.
Amen.
All right.
Everybody got that, huh?
All right. But I've never had it in a pie.
What?
Yeah. Well, see, that's the same thing I just got through telling you. That's different. That's the difference in the culture of the people. You're going to be surprised when you do see the picture.
How so?
Yes, how so? Because you're the one taking the pictures.
Yes.
Of something that you have never seen, people you had never met.
That's right.
So this is an experience.
But that's what life gives you, the chance to
this
do
is what
that.
it's all about.
A lot of people just sit behind their closed door and they never
Don't
get
know
outside.
nothing. They don't even know what's happening out there.
No. I continued on into Savannah, a refined old world city founded by the British in the 18th century. Muir spent the last of his money on a dreary hotel. Sam and I looked forward to a bath and a good sleep, but encountered unexpected prejudice. Well, Graham has just told me that the hotel here will not accept Sam, and I just am so annoyed that I'm going to go up to the desk and insist that Sammy get put up, because he even has a Canine Good Citizen Award paper. So we're going to go down and see whether or not, or see what he has to say, why Sam can't stay in this hotel.
What do you think of Sam? Sam's great. Never saw a dog with such a good temperament.
Yes, hi.
We're going to be happy to accept the dog. We're going to charge you a $25 fee.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I thought that that was going to be...
Your cousin. Yeah.
What made the change in the opinion of...
It was never an issue.
Never was an issue?
No.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's very nice.
Okay. But it will be a $25 fee.
Yes.
Added in addition because of the actual animal.
Right?
Okay.
No, that's very fine.
Okay. So we'll be momentarily.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well.
He doesn't listen well.
You said that in this case you didn't allow it.
Maybe they didn't understand English. This is America.
Just 2 years after the Civil War, Savannah's streets were dangerous. Muir had to find a safe haven, and he'd heard of a cemetery just outside of town. There, he'd have a vision, one he would never forget. There are very few places along my trip that I've been able to touch the same exact places that he was at, and the Bonaventure Cemetery is one of them. John Muir had walked most of the way to Florida when he camped here, more than 800 miles in 39 days. Overwhelmed by the birdsong, trees, and light he found among the tombs, he said, any sensible person would choose to dwell here with the dead, rather than with the lazy, disorderly living. They didn't put the sign at the other end. They should have done that. Tell us, huh? It was as if the further from home he traveled, the more his old beliefs dissolved and new ones were born. No longer could he see death as an accident, a deplorable punishment, the arch enemy of life. Here, he put in order what mattered most, what would sustain him the rest of his life. He said, let children walk with nature. Let them see the beautiful blendings and communions of death and life, their inseparable unity, as taught in woods and meadows. They will learn death is stingless indeed and as beautiful as life. I really am struck by the beauty of it. I was prepared for it by his journal, but it's nothing like the coming and being here. And I found something that wasn't here in Muir's time, and that was the grave of Conrad Aiken, who has a wonderful thing on his tombstone which says, Cosmic Mariner, Destination Unknown. I like that a lot. I think Muir would have liked that too. He started his journal by saying, John Muir, Earth, Planet, Universe. Whoa, it's gonna be a buggy evening though. I can tell. I think I might sleep soundly. When John Muir's first night here, he slept on, he didn't know exactly what he was sleeping on, and he woke up in the morning and He realized he'd slept on a grave, and he said, well, I had a pretty good night's sleep, but probably not as good a sleep as the person beneath me. From Savannah, Muir could walk no further. To avoid the swamps, he had to take a boat to Florida through the Sea Islands. I went to visit a friend I'd not seen for 20 years who lives on Ossabaw Island. It's twice as big as Bermuda. Sandy West has called Ossabaw home all her life since her family bought the island in the 1920s with a fortune made from putting plate glass in skyscrapers.
Hi.
Oh, it's great to see you.
You look just exactly the same.
Well, I'm a little thinner up
I knew
top.
that from one of the things.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't.
John Muir would have felt at home here, in this wild and undeveloped landscape. Sandy has worked for the island all her life, to keep it a sanctuary, not only for its varied wildlife and wilderness, but for people too. She has hosted hundreds of school children, professors, and scientists, all who've come to learn from the island.
Now, is this the lady who made the wise investment?
That is the lady, the one with the long curls.
And
So sad.
oh, now wait. Now, the long curls, is that?
That's me.
That's you.
That's me, and that's my mommy,
That's Mum.
who Nellie is named after. And that's my brother, who, can you imagine being dressed up in a Lord Fauntleroy suit? He almost had a stroke.
Ancient oaks and Spanish moss, palms and palmettos evoke the island's balance of nature.
In other words, it's a complete ecosystem. This doesn't change, and it's completely surrounded because it's an island. So the balance of nature works here. And to have a place that is an entire ecosystem, which is rare to begin with, untouched, unmanipulated, and have it within 20 minutes of Savannah. I mean, that's unheard of.
We stopped often, touched on many subjects, especially trees.
Because this was really the heart of Muir's, one of Muir's passions was...
What was?
Trees.
Oh,
the great trees.
And think of that being all one.
All one tree, yeah. How old do you imagine it to be?
This one is maybe, what, 4 or 5?
You were saying something about people want to put up signs here as opposed to what's the two different things?
Well, I'm passionate about Ossabaw being left alone, and everybody wants to meddle. Human beings have to change things, as you well know, and they meddle and they wreck stuff. I have never had a sign except to show people where they have to go. But these kids, it was a while ago, and they were handicapped. And then this wonderful man brought a whole bunch of them, 8 or 9 years old, took them all over everywhere. And when they got back, they wrote me this letter. And it said, "Dear Mrs. West, we love you better than anybody in the world because you know how to leave things alone." How about that? And they said to their teachers, we went to the egret rookery, and there were no neon lights. You know, we saw it the way it's supposed to be. But that's why I'm fighting so hard here, but God knows how long it'll stay there.
Well, this has been one of the dilemmas of doing a trip 136 years after somebody did it. I mean, I'm on a motorcycle traveling down roads. Their thought, it never occurred to John Muir there'd be cars, highways, malls, and the numbers of us.
Isn't it awful? Tell me about it. Listen, I just got back from Quebec and my ears are flapping about overpopulation. My friend, Mrs. Poole. No, we feel exactly. I know.
Sandy's concern is for the island's future, as Muir's was to preserve nature for its own sake, to remind us, as he said, nature's object in making animals and plants might possibly be for the happiness of all, and not the creation of all for the happiness of one, including the alligators that had terrified him. As he wrote at the end of his journal, I now have better thoughts of alligators. Honorable representatives of an older creation, may you long enjoy your lilies and rushes and be blessed now and then with a mouthful of terror-stricken man. I've been forced to reflect on this journey how wilderness has been shrunk down to smaller and smaller bits, how without the efforts of John Muir and people like Sandy West, there'd be little or none of it at all. Muir's boat ride through the Sea Islands ended here on Florida's east coast at Fernandina Beach. He walked the railroad tracks across the peninsula, then the only way through the swamps. I drove across Florida along a straight road parallel to the railroad Muir walked to Cedar Key.
I got about 20 miles to go to get to Cedar Key, and I can't wait. I'm going to go down to the ocean, and I'm going to find a table, and I'm going to order myself a margarita, and I'm going to sit there with my buddy Sam and reminisce about the month it's taken us to get there. I haven't burned up as much shoe leather as I have fried brain cells trying to get down here.
Hello.
Hi. What have you there?
This is a camera, and I came to ask you if you'd ever heard about John Muir.
Yeah?
What do we know about John Muir?
Oh my, we have a little book about him here somewhere. He was here, you know, for quite a while in Cedar Key. This is going to be a John Muir exhibit here, this little empty hole, but that's
This is the John Muir exhibit?
That's as far as it's gotten. Now, have you been out to the State Museum?
No, I just really got into town right now.
Oh.
John Muir never reached the tropic gardens of South America. Instead, he went west to California, where he lived among the redwoods and the mountains of Yosemite Valley. He fought to create the first national parks and articulated a philosophy that recognized in nature a home for the human spirit. I realized it all started here on this 1,000-mile journey. As he said, I went out for a walk and finally concluded to stay out till sundown, for going out, I found, I was really going in.
Cheers, Guy. What do you think the biggest things were that's happened, Sam, huh? Are you heartened by what we've come through? Heartened about the future of nature in our time here at the end of the 20th century? Or are you a little bit concerned about the ability for nature to hold up her own? I'm actually not. I think nature will be fine. I think that the kind of changes that Muir couldn't anticipate, we sitting here today can't anticipate the changes that'll be in another 136 years.
But I'd lay odds that nature will be around a long time. But I think that if we don't change our attitude, we may not be here in 136 years.